Michelangelo Antonioni emerged as a filmmaker in a period of profound transition in the film industry. In the aftermath of World War II and the Italian neorealism movement that had dominated the previous decades, Italy entered a period of economic prosperity marked by rapid industrialization, urban growth, and modernization. But this material progress was accompanied by a different emotional shift. Turning away from the neorealist focus on survival and poverty, Antonioni instead examines the psychological consequences of wealth, alienation, the prioritization of wealth over emotional connection, and the gradual erosion of intimacy. His films reflect a modern world in which societal advancements conceal inner emptiness, a vision most fully realized in his Alienation trilogy, L'Avventura, La Notte, and L'Eclisse. This video essay considers how Antonioni's trilogy articulates these themes while simultaneously exemplifying auteur theory and the defining characteristics of art cinema.
While people were enjoying more material comfort and job opportunities, Michelangelo saw this shift as creating an emotional and moral void instead of true fulfillment. The characters in his films are often financially secure and socially mobile, but they struggle with emotional disorientation, making it hard for them to form deep connections and find a sense of purpose.
Oh, no, non ti amo più, non ti amo più. E anche tu, non mi ami più.
Sta zitta, sta zitta.
Influenced by a broader European art cinema, Antonioni favors an open and episodic narrative, long takes, and moments of dead time in which little happens, but much is revealed emotionally. This stylistic choice mirrors a society in which characters lack direction or purpose. In Michelangelo's trilogy, his subtle camera work, precise composition, and focus on space rather than direct action really turn his filmmaking style into meaning. These films don't just depict alienation, they actively create the feeling of it through their form, making his aesthetic a direct mirror of historical conditions that shaped his perspective.
So let's examine the films on an explicit, implicit, and symptomatic level. On the explicit level, L'Avventura is about Anna's disappearance and the tricky relationship that grows between Claudia, Anna's best friend, and Sandro, Anna's fiancé. La Notte shows us a single day and night in a marriage that has run out of emotional stability, and L'Eclisse focuses on a short, unstable romance playing out in Rome's financial district. But implicitly, these stories are really exploring themes of feeling disconnected, emotionally distant, and the breakdown of meaningful human connections. The unresolved disappearance in L'Avventura suggests the replaceability of relationships. The struggling marriage in La Notte exposes the emptiness that can hide beneath professional and social success. And the fractured relationship in L'Eclisse highlights how our desires are shaped by things like speed, money, and abstract concepts. Finally, on a symptomatic level, the whole trilogy reveals the deeper worries of post-war Italian society, especially the moral and emotional fallout of modernization. Antonioni's films give us a, quote, blunt presentation of the decadent, inconsequential, and blasé members of the Italian bourgeoisie in the 1960s, showing lives lived in an emotional and moral vacuum, unquote. So the character's inability to grieve, commit, or stay close isn't just about them. It's a symptom of a larger cultural issue where old values have crumbled and modern life brings emotional confusion instead of real fulfillment.
Vorrei non amarti, o amarti molto meglio.
Michelangelo's directorial style maintains quite consistent throughout the trilogy, with similarities across the three films that intimately interlink them to each other. Through mise-en-scène, in the Alienation trilogy, characters are constantly dwarfed by their environments. In La Avventura, Claudia and Sandro are given significant space in the frame. The rocks and the sea overpower their small statures against the background. Michelangelo utilizes this technique to visually showcase the internal, psychological, and emotional detachment of his characters. Rather than just serving as a background, these environments act as a mirror to the characters' alienation, inability to communicate, and the restlessness of the modern post-war life. And while these characters may be physically together, emotionally they cannot be further apart. In this scene in La Notte, Antonioni also conveys the emotional disconnect of the characters, displaying how women yearn for affection and love, and how the men are stiff, unyielding, like inanimate objects.
In terms of cinematography, Antonioni frequently employs the same techniques to create an overall cohesive work. He intentionally frames his characters between bars and fences, enclosing them, visually depicting themes of confinement, emotional alienation, and the dehumanizing impact of modern urban environments. His characters are islands, isolated, vacant, and unable to connect to those around them.
Io le isole non le ho mai capite. Con tutto questo mare attorno, poverine.
These bars also juxtapose the tightness of the cage with the openness of negative space and other shots, which make the shots feel even emptier. In this scene in L'Eclisse, the glass acts as a physical barrier to display emotional distance of the characters. They may be physically close, but they are unable to achieve true emotional connection. Through editing, Antonioni furthers his themes of alienation by emphasizing the lack of communication. Scenes drag on with minimal cutting and slow pacing, which allows the audience to sit with the same ennui, or boredom, and loneliness as the characters feel them. This also mirrors the aimlessness the characters feel and reflects it back onto the audience. Antonioni's use of sound, or lack thereof, plays a crucial role in his films and their themes. Antonioni does not use much diegetic music or sound effects. When there is silence, it is palpable. There is nothing to detract from the isolation and loneliness when the characters do not speak, which is often. In L'Eclisse, the film bookends with silence. In the first 5 minutes of the film, there is no dialogue, no music, only the sounds of Vittoria moving around the apartment. Similarly, after Vittoria leaves Piero at the end of the film, there is no dialogue for 3 minutes, and for the last 8 minutes, there's barely any sound at all. Only the ambiance of a slow cityscape. This allows the audience to sit with the film, with the void of connection and the character's silent existentialism. Antonioni challenges traditional narrative structures to create films that are felt rather than just heard.
Looking at Andrew Sarris's idea of what makes a director an auteur, there are 3 main concepts they should fulfill: technical competence, a distinguishable style, and interior meaning. Sarris argues that while technical skill and stylistic consistency are essential, the most significant element is interior meaning, which he defines as, quote, extrapolated from the tension between a director's personality and his material, end quote. By this definition, Michelangelo completely satisfies the criteria as an auteur. His technical competence shows how he controls everything in scene, his use of long takes, and his subtle editing. His unique style appears in moments like open-ended stories, long stretches of silence, and shots that highlight modern architecture and empty spaces. Across the trilogy, these formal and aesthetic choices consistently build towards interior meaning. A focus on alienation, emotional detachment, and the struggles of modern relationships. The unsolved disappearance in La Avventura, the crumbling marriage in La Notte, and the way the impersonal urban image replaced any romantic resolution in L'Eclisse altogether. These form a clear authorial signature. So, Antonioni's films aren't just repeating themes. They are showing a consistent worldview where the film's very structure expresses the psychological and moral instability of modern life. This checks all 3 of Sarris's boxes for auteur status.
Moving on, while Antonioni does not notably reference previous film styles, genres, or movements, he's very clearly trying to break the established conventions of Italian neorealism that had dominated the previous decades. Italian neorealism is categorized by its focus on the working class, documentary-style depiction of post-World War II Italian life, its use of non-actors with gritty, realistic visuals that are shot on location with available lighting. With the rise of the bourgeois class and a collective feeling of aimlessness, Antonioni found his muse in the wealthy, creating a modern, abstract composition vastly different from what had been seen in film history up until this point.
Watching the trilogy was a challenging but rewarding experience. Obviously, the films reject the emotional clarity and closure that we're used to with films made in the present day. At first, the long silences and open-ended narrative was very frustrating and a little tedious. But after understanding the meaning, it made us contemplate more about what the movie is trying to convey. What affected us the most was how space, framing, and architecture speaks louder than dialogue or action of the characters. His use of space and the placement of his characters are always intentional and have an unspoken message. Out of the trilogy, La Notte was our favorite due to how much that was left unsaid. This marriage between the two characters had no genuine connection whatsoever, and you can see how Lydia, the main female protagonist, tries to reignite their relationship but is often dismissed. One scene that stood out to the both of us was the ending where she reads a letter Giovanni wrote to her. It was truly beautifully written, and it makes you want to understand what happened between when the letter was written and where we see the characters now.
Svegliata e sorridendo ancora nel sonno mi hai baciato e ho sentito che non dovevo temere niente, che noi saremo sempre come in quel momento, uniti da qualcosa che è più forte del tempo e dell'abitudine.
Di chi è questa lettera?
È tua.
How did the disconnect happen? One of the most frustrating things about these films is that you don't get to see what happened before the film or what happens after. You get a peek of their life and relationships during a small window of time, and that's it. No happy ending, no resolutions, but maybe that's what makes Antonioni such a great filmmaker, giving you the same dissatisfaction the characters experience.
In examining L'Avventura, La Notte, and L'Eclisse through the lens of Andrew Sarris's auteur theory, Michelangelo Antonioni emerges clearly as an auteur. Throughout the trilogy, Antonioni demonstrates his technical competence through his careful control of mise-en-scène, long takes, and subtle editing. His unique style is clear in the open narrative, long silences, and the persistent use of modern spaces that make his characters look small and isolated. Most importantly is how these stylistic choices create a consistent interior meaning on alienation, emotional detachment, and how shaky modern relationships can be. Rather than offering resolution or comfort, Antonioni pushes us to face absence, ambiguity, and emotional drifting as defining parts of post-war modern life. Ultimately, the trilogy shows how cinema can express psychological and moral crises by not explaining them, but through what we see and experience over time. This solidifies Antonioni's lasting significance as an auteur whose work continues to challenge and redefine how stories and feelings can be represented on screen.